professional programming course. Right. And you're all here for that? Yes? That's what you expect to be here to be doing? Good, okay. Okay, now this is a somewhat unusual course, and I kind of created it because we had the problem that when we teach you guys the software engineering course, you tend to do a bunch of theory not connected to a big project, right? And the theory kind of all seems nice and all, but it doesn't kind of connect with what you'd actually do in a real project in the real world. And that course tends to teach a bunch of the theory around software engineering. You guys are now going to be mostly doing a Bachelor Thesis. So who's not doing a Bachelor Thesis this year? Right, we have one. Now, you are doing another project?
Well, I think in mobile programming we had next year because the lecture is 6, so I don't know yet. But there's a specific project, right?
There will be a project in the mobile programming course, yeah. So are you an international student or?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So, which is why, yeah. So the idea of this course partly grew from one, the software engineering was kind of disconnected from a large project. And two, I got irritated over a number of years of having to give a grade to the bachelor students which was representative of their ability to write reports. Right? So you'd get a C because, you know, you'd write amazing code, but your written project you'd submitted was kind of, right? You hadn't written well, but you're a great programmer. And I couldn't give you an A to say you're a great programmer because, you know, the report you wrote, your bachelor thesis, was kind of average. And there are other students who would get a B in their bachelor thesis who I wouldn't want to touch code, right? I wouldn't want to employ them because, you know, you employ them and they'll screw everything up. But they write a really good report, right? That felt wrong to me, that we should be graduating people where in computer science and in programming where there wasn't this connection. And so I created this additional 5-point course where I said, right, in this course, we will talk about the attitude of being a professional programmer. We will focus on the quality of the code you write and do code reviews and try and improve your programming as a professional, independently of what you document in your bachelor thesis. It will give me the ability to grade you and give you specific time to clean up your code and grade you on that code. So that when someone asks, when you go to an employer and they say, okay, can you give us a code sample? You can give them a code sample without them going, right, we're not employing that person. Because, you know, a lot of your bachelor code ends up being quite hacky because you're rushed and you're doing it at the last moment and we'll just get it done, right? And you don't want to show that code to a potential employer saying, yeah, no, this is the best I can do, because it's not, right? And so so I created this course to say, look, I want to be able to grade students on their programming ability and say this is, like, so when I recommend somebody to an employer, I can say, you look at their professional programming grade, that's the grade that matters, right? Bachelor thesis stuff, that was about how they write, you know, document stuff academically. If you want a programmer, that's the grade you should read. So I want to be able to do that. I want you to be able to focus on improving the quality of a code, and I wanted to talk about those other aspects of programming that go beyond just following a book description of how to program. And it also allows me to bring in things like, I got an email from the ACM this morning at 2 AM because they're American, but it was talking about the programmer's oath. So they're going to have a webinar like mid-January on the ethics of being a programmer, right? And so that's the sort of thing we talk about in this course, right? What are your professional requirements as a programmer? What are you responsible for? Particularly in this era as we start to have autonomous cars and we start automating criminal detection systems, right? We start automating loan. Like, if you ask for a loan from a bank, right? It's not a human being that looks at your application. It's an algorithm. It identifies the amount of risk. If you're low risk, it says yes. If you're high risk, it says no. If you're somewhere in the middle, it will give you a default answer and put it on someone's desk, and if they get to it, they might review it. Otherwise, it will just leave you with a default answer, right? That's just what happens now. So as a programmer, people's lives depend on how you implement those algorithms, right? In a car, people's lives depend on whether you get the braking or acceleration right? And what are your ethical responsibilities around that? Right? So in this course, we cover kind of all of those sort of things. It also is a course where we mix discussions and lectures and topics with code reviews of your actual bachelor thesis. Right? So we will have you, all of you, during the semester, will be presenting your code on the screens up here, and myself and sometimes Marius and Christopher as well, and the rest of the class will do code review on your code and talk about how to improve it and talk about where it was good and where it was bad and how you could make it better, right? As part of the process of becoming a professional. Right? So that's the intent of the course. As part of that, we have I have a kind of decision around Blackboard. I don't know what are your thoughts on Blackboard?
It's bad.
It's kind of bad.
It's hard to say, but I kind of miss Frontier.
That's a, you know, you're in a bad relationship when you miss Frontier.
At least it didn't kick me out all the time.
Yeah. So last year we used Confluence to document the course, and we encourage you to use professional project management tools. And so we have the full Jira Atlassian stack. So some of you have used that in the game programming a little bit. Doing proper project management means, you know, that you can actually document your time, and your tools should have versioning on them, and you should be able to integrate things easily. So we are going to use Confluence as the page for this, rather than using Blackboard, right? So rather than putting all my information in Blackboard and sending information, like that's where everything gets done, and trying to create Blackboard groups for you and have you submit by the Blackboard groups and all that kind of stuff. That's a lot of hassle for me, and it seems to break half the time anyway. So what we're going to do is we will rely on your version control system, right? So I would expect Git. If you want to use Subversion and use a centralized repository, that's okay too. But you will give us access to your repo, and I will be watching your development during the semester. We will be looking at how you commit things, your code comments, your commit styles. We'll be talking about commit styles. We'll be discussing integration of testing. Atlassian allows us to have a Bamboo server, and so we can do full continuous integration testing, CI. So every time you commit code with a webhook that says release, it will build it, test it. If it passes all the tests, it can then put it out to the server. We'll be looking at those kind of automating your build process, and looking at your build process as something that isn't just kind of, oh, I just whack it together and we get it done, but is a full professional system. We'll look at deployment, so how you build your executable, how you make sure the DLLs are packaged with it properly and installed properly on machines. So going beyond just Hacky University, I've got an executable and I'll send you an executable, but actually, you know, what does packaging look like? What does an installer look like? How do you make sure how do you build your own library so that you can use that library in other projects and include libraries. So we're going to do that full thing. We're currently updating the Jira system from 7.4 to 7.7. I see we've just added capture, which is a way of creating Jira issues while you are testing something, right? So for example, web pages, it brings up a plugin for your browser, so you can just like highlight things and raise that as an issue, which does a screen capture and adds it to the issue and log and has your default information, and so it automates a lot of the process of logging and tracking what you're doing. We have a couple. I had just a wee chat with Eva on the way over here. Given most of you are doing your bachelor thesis, how many of you were thinking of using LaTeX for your thesis? Most people. Okay. So I'm maintaining. I also maintain the LaTeX build, and that's partly because I like automating things, and there's a whole bunch of stuff I've automated in the LaTeX style guide. There is another option to use Confluence. Now we did this. I've done this a few years ago. Last year we didn't. I didn't have any students take up the option. But one option is to document your project in Confluence, which is a wiki, and then serialize that using a PDF serializer out of Confluence, so that it generates your thesis from all your wiki pages, and you choose which wiki pages go in and which order. Because this was a discussion we had yesterday with the Masters externals, was LaTeX is, so you're aware, LaTeX is not used outside of universities, right? It tends to be an academic activity, right? Now, I like LaTeX myself because it makes documents look pretty, right? And it feels like coding, so I'm not having to worry about setting margins and moving images around and fonts and all of the other things you have to do. But it's not really a tool that is clearly used by industry in any way, right? Confluence is used by people, and Confluence is used by companies as well as universities and like as a professional wiki tool. So if you don't ever plan to do any academic work, or you don't care how pretty your thesis looks, then one option is to think about doing it in Confluence, right? Because you can document your code in Confluence, you can document what you're doing in Confluence, and then use that as the thing that generates your thesis. Okay. And for the game programmers, I've had our external agree that they don't mind reading both the PDF version and going and having a look at the wiki version of the thesis. So it's an acceptable way of presenting a thesis. So that's another option for you guys to think about. If you want to go with LaTeX, I'm quite happy to support your LaTeX because, you know, I like LaTeX. It's not because I don't like LaTeX, I quite like it. I prefer it to Word. And if you had a choice between Word and Confluence, I would suggest Confluence. Right? So, but most of you seem to be quite happy to learn LaTeX as a markup language. There are some nice things about using LaTeX. One of those, and it took me a while as a student to kind of do that mental transfer where I went, oh yeah, that's right, I can write files from my programs. So I could write a LaTeX file directly from my program. Right? It's not a separate thing, because you wouldn't think of writing a Word document, right? You wouldn't think, oh, I can write the binary version of a Word document, right? Because that doesn't make any sense, right? But for LaTeX, I can write files that have, you know, slash header, slash section and slash chapter and have LaTeX formatting in them. I can write those directly out of my program, so I can have it make its own documentation. So I can write a program that writes my thesis. Right? So that transition to thinking, no, text is something I can generate. And you know, and for my programs, one of the things I did for my thesis was to think, oh well, you know I want to have this as a graph, right, in my thesis, and I want to have a table. So instead of just saving the things to a file, I actually saved them into LaTeX format. So they came immediately out of my program in their final format for inclusion in my thesis. And so if I wanted to update my data, I could just rerun the program and then reload the thesis, and it was already updated because it wrote directly in to the files that it needed to. Right? So it's kind of, there's this kind of mental switch to think, wait a minute, no, that's just data, right? It's just data. And one of the things I will talk to you guys quite a bit about through the whole semester is this idea of automating things, right? Not merely to save time, and computer scientists tend to try and automate things even if it doesn't actually save them time, but more for precision, that you make sure you get it right. Right? And actually over the last semester, so Mariusz and Christopher, because they had the multi-choice section was done on paper, so they graded it and put it into the spreadsheet. And they found they have about a 3 to 5% error rate of doing that. Right? Which meant when Mariusz redid it, he saw occasionally they would disagree on a grade, and you'd have to go and look and see who was right, because you'd just manually make an error while doing a manual process. So automation isn't merely about speeding things up, it's also about making sure it does exactly the same thing every time. Perhaps the weirdest thing about this course is that in the end, professionalism isn't a tool. It's not a thing I'm going to teach you. Right? Professionalism is an attitude towards your work. Right? It's an attitude towards what you do. So this course is not a content course, it's an attitude course. Right? We're trying to get you to change the way you think about coding and think about what you do. I might not succeed in that, but I'll try. We'll try and transition you from basically feeling like, that you just hack up some stuff and I just type in some stuff, to actually thinking, okay, as a professional, how should I approach this task? Okay. If you want to use full Jira, Smart Commits, integrated tracking, we have those platforms set up for you. If you want to use Trello and GitHub, that's also perfectly acceptable. If you want to use Bugzilla and Subversion and whatever tool you are comfortable with, we will support you on that tool. It makes this course difficult because I'm going to be supporting however many different languages you guys are going to be coding in. Right? So some of you might be using JavaScript, some of you will be doing C#, some C++, there'll be some visual programming PHP and code reviewing, blueprints in Unreal, where it's all visual programming. That's a whole new skill that is quite different to code reviewing written text, right? So, but we will do those things. We will look at different programming languages, and like I did for my third year game programming class, I'm also happy to have weeks, topics, lectures on things that you guys have decided are important. Right? So if you go, hey, we really need something on how Spectre and Meltdown work, because as a professional programmer, I want to understand how those hacks work so I know how to defend against them. Right? If that's what you want, that's what we can do, right? Because it's a current issue around professional development and how you deal with those, right? So I'm also happy to have those things happen in this course. Okay, so we have the well, and actually I should plug you guys in so you can see this. Currently, it's only the stream who've been watching me. Oh, they've stolen my HDMI cable, and I don't have my HDMI cable with me. Do any of you have an HDMI cable? Apparently people have been stealing the HDMI cables out of this room as well, because... Right. Yeah, if you go and grab that, because then I can... If one of you grab an HDMI cable from there. Because what I should be able to do is go in the announcements on Blackboard, if you had Blackboard up, I've got one announcement, and it points you to the Confluence wiki page, which starts with the course description, and describes the submission. And so if you go to the Blackboard page for this course and then you click the link, it will take you to where we actually have most of the material. Now, we're going to be slowly handing this course over to, because this is my last semester teaching this course, so I'm handing it over to Irvin, Colin. So he'll be coming in occasionally and kind of seeing what we do here, but I expect to create, so this is the start of the course, I expect to create in this class, given that it's an attitude course, I expect for us in this room to consider ourselves to be on the same team, right? We are not, so I don't want, when we have discussions, you shouldn't be being assholes to each other, and you shouldn't be trying to compete with each other and be making recommendations that try and make someone else's code worse, right? Just to try and, because, you know, I want to get the top grade and I want no one else to get an A, so I'm going to kind of give them really bad advice to try and screw them up, right? I also don't want people to make fun of other people, right? One of the things we will do, and I did this last year and I'll do it again, is the first code review we do is going to be of my code from my thesis, but it's from the early part of my thesis. And some of my code was really terrible, right? And I will rip my own code apart in front of you to show you that, you know, everybody writes bad code, and it's not about you, it's about the code, right? This is, and I'm not being nasty because I think you're not worthy. I'm being critical because I want you to get better.
I think you might have touched language settings.
Oh, weird. Right. So, well, yes, but I'm just thinking, is it actually in here?
I think it might be no. Never mind.
Probably like the here on left.
Can someone who speaks Spanish help me? I don't. It might actually be Portuguese.
I don't think it's Spanish.
Not the same. No, it's Portuguese.
It's Portuguese. Yeah, I was doing some testing with Portuguese language, so it might be my options in here that somewhere I've set it to Portuguese.
I don't think it's in Firefox.
No, I think
No,
it's
it's
in
just
the page.
in
Page would have been
Yeah.
maybe here
Click
in the help
Or
here.
online.
It was about Confluence. No, that's not there. So no, there. No. That's tools. General view, maybe. Content.
So
I don't know.
I think so personally I think it is in Firefox, because I have set my Firefox up to do Portuguese stuff before.
Okay.
But
So-
wouldn't our option page
Hmm?
be in,
That's weird.
Portuguese? Wouldn't that page be in Portuguese if that's the case? So I don't
It
know
should
if
be.
that's a bit-
Right.
Just very quick. Like that.
Right. I'm in class at the moment, but yeah. So I'm just trying to sort out why I've got Portuguese, but language in my thing. But yeah, so I'm streaming as well, so they're finding me doing the strange stuff. But yeah, so,
The web developer tools, because I seem to recall that J languages, they're like development language.
in
Or maybe click Confluence logo.
What?
I found the Confluence defaults to the browser language.
yes, So it's, for some reason, in my browser language, I've got, okay, choose. Haha! There we go. Let's go that and go move up. Haha! Right. Because I was doing some testing of a website in Portuguese, I probably had reset that. Now, haha! Yes, there we go. Thank you. Thank you for trying to help me. So if we go back to here, right. So now the content isn't in Portuguese. So the learning outcomes of the course. Okay, for example, this is a wiki, right? This is Confluence. So the course material is in the tool I'm suggesting you could use. So this allows you to do things like expand out sections. And so here we have what we expect to do in this course and the learning outcomes of knowledge, skills, and general competence. Under the knowledge and skills and general competence, we want you to think about other programming languages, right? Hopefully you've been exposed to some programming languages. Have any of you used Haskell? Any functional programming languages at all? Nope. Anybody use Prolog or Logic programming languages? Nope. I assume some of you have used JavaScript and scripting languages, yes? Good, excellent. So JavaScript is a yes. C++? Yes, everyone used C++? Maybe C a bit? Yep, okay. So you've had an imperative language, you've had an OO language, you've had a scripting language. But you've not had logic languages, functional languages, and you probably haven't had many domain-specific languages. Right? So there's a whole category of languages, actually multiple categories of languages, that you have not been exposed to. We will talk about some of those and talk about some of the benefits of having more tools in your programming toolkit, right? So that you can do things. So that's one of the things we'll talk about. Understanding the need for process control. So if you're doing your bachelor thesis, you will be time logging. So you need to choose a full stack of tools that help you manage your project. We have, as I said, we have the full Atlassian Slack, but you could use Slack and Trello and Toggle and Meistertask is one out there that was interesting. There's a whole bunch of project management tools. We will help you with those and help you understand and how to use them. So we're interested in using better version control than you've probably been doing, right? So earlier today I was working on the and if I hopefully get this right, GitHub. If I go to GitHub, I was working on the Master's Thesis LaTeX template. And I think it's that one. Yeah. So today so the Bachelor Thesis LaTeX template is in this cop CSE. It is in a GitHub repo under Bachelor Thesis NTNU. There's also a Beamer for giving presentations, so you can actually also write, if you're really committed to LaTeX, you can write your presentation in LaTeX as well and avoid PowerPoint. But the Master's Thesis template I was working on today, and as you can see there are 5 issues, and the issue I worked on today was sideways tables. So in the Master's Thesis the students wanted to have sideways tables which put them at, like, you know, that way instead of across the page. They rotate them to be landscape, and so that's what I committed, and I did a smart commit, which meant my commit message with this number 9 meant that I tag my changes with the issue they're related to. Right? So this is part of trying to do things more professionally rather than just whacking it together and getting it done, is to say, well, what's the issue? What am I solving? Right? Because if I go and look at my code, I can go and look and say, well, okay, if I look at the commits, and there aren't that many. There are only 32. But here I have, right, so this stuff was working with 9. Here I didn't do it, right, because I forgot, right? I'm not perfect, I make mistakes, but I've been trying to connect these commits. These merges are kind of automatic things, but the added sideways tables means that I've got an issue in my issue tracker connected to the commit that I made. Right? So this is, and actually what I did is I started changing it, and then, oh yeah, before I commit, I better create the issue. So I went and go and create the issue, and then I committed to that issue. Right? So it would be tracked. But it means you can do interesting things in your code. Like, for example, if I go back to the code, and I go and have a look at the includes, and I go implementation, which has, so you can see, alright, so it was implementation where added sideways tables was last changed with issue 9. If I go into that code, and I go into blame, I get to see where in the code I was changing things in this issue 9 tracking, right? So I can see, so all of this code was added as part of issue 9. Right? So I know where my code comes from. Right? I know why was this stuff added? Well, it was issued because of this problem. And that problem was this issue, which I can write additional comments on, I can have more challenges, and I can do that entirely within GitHub. Bitbucket does the same thing. It has its own issue tracker. So you can do these things integrated in here. We also use Jira, and we can do the same thing between GitHub or Bitbucket and into Jira. So you have a Jira issue tracked, and then Jira does time logging against that, and has your full agile poker, and you do all of the kind of automating and checking of things, right? So in this course, I will expect you to become more professional by the end of the semester. Right? That's my objective. So as part of this course, I also need to know what your objectives are. Right? So what do you guys think are professional programmers? What's the difference between a normal programmer and a professional programmer? Someone who earns money. Money is one of the... Yes, you're right. Money is one of the differences between you guys. So when I ask... So you know, do you guys feel like professional programmers yet? No. Do you... Maybe... Have any of you worked commercially? So we have got like 3 commercial developers. So you've been paid to be a programmer.
Yeah.
Yep. So do you feel like a professional programmer?
Well, not yet mostly because there is like no optimal professional programmer, I think. It's like always a process of improving oneself to like get closer to an unattainable goal.
That's kind of a good way of thinking, right? That is the kind of I'm wanting to improve way of thinking, right? If you decide that you are a perfect programmer, then you probably stop learning new languages and stop learning to be better, right? So I wouldn't ever recommend anybody think that they're perfect. I think the adage around craft. So you guys, how many hours does it take to become a master craftsman at something? 10K, right? The 10,000 hour rule. How many hours have you guys been programming?
Less.
Can you work it out? Right? If you think about how much time you spend programming and how like programming versus sitting in lectures listening to random people talk about random stuff, and exclude all of that, right? And actually do how many hours have you spent sitting down writing and debugging code?
Well, if you're on the debugging part.
Many hours debugging. Well, debugging code. We are going to have... So have you guys been taught how to debug?
How that seems to work.
Shouting at the computer.
Yeah, we have had some notion of using the breakpoints and
Yeah, it was a part of the development course.
yeah, using IDEs.
Tests.
So you had some... so the testing and the app development course.
Yeah, you could
Yep.
also use that as a part of the debugging.
Right.
Just like what's going
other programming? Do you guys get taught how to debug, or are you just expected to do it?
Yeah.
Mostly, yeah. That's really weird, right? It's really weird that in a degree where we're teaching you to work in an industry where we know that the majority of your time is spent debugging, not developing, right? And if we asked you, like, on a project that took you 200 hours, how much of that time is adding new lines of code, and how much of that time is fixing the lines of code that are already there? 80-20? If you're lucky, it's 20% of the time you're adding new things.
I mean, I got taught by older people in my class how to debug in the programming class. I don't know why we weren't taught how to do debugging in the programming course.
But you're not, and it's not just about this course. Virtually nobody around the planet do I see actually teaching debugging techniques as part of a programming course, right? They try and teach you how to program, not how to fix your bad programming, right? It's as if, you know, you're supposed to get it right the first time or something crazy, right? So in this course, I'm going to, we will actually talk about debugging techniques, and I want to get you better at debugging, right? Because as a professional, you're going to spend a lot of your time debugging not just your own code, but a bunch of code from other stupid people, including yourself, like 6 months ago. Why am I so stupid? Why is my code so terrible? So the longer you live with the code that you write, the more depressed you get about the person you were. Because you think, oh my god, this is so bad. Which is the kind of shameful exercise I have to do when I code review my terrible code when I was your age. And I go, oh my god, it's so embarrassing. It's not that. But no, it you realize the mistakes you make, and you forget why you did things. And one of the things we've been trying to work you up to is as part of that craft and part of becoming a professional programmer is being able to debug quickly, knowing where to look, knowing how to find bugs, knowing how to track them down, having stepwise processes for saying, okay, this isn't working. What is my process for detecting where it's not working? How do I efficiently do that? One of the things that my friend Jason, who's been programming as long as I have, one of the things he says is that for him, the appearance of code, right, has an aesthetic quality, right? You have pretty code and ugly code, right? And one of the things he does when he's looking at code bases is he'll scroll out his IDE until he's just seeing the shape of the code, right? And he has a feeling for the shape of code. And he looks at code and goes, yep, that's good. We're looking, ooh, not sure about that, and zoom in from that zoomed out shape of the code look into the actual code to debug it, right? Because it's an aesthetic appreciation for what good code looks like, sort of from layout and aesthetics, right? But you tend to only get that when you spend, I would potentially argue, hundreds of thousands of hours with code, right? Because, so I started programming when I was 10. I got my first commercial job when I was 16. So I got paid when I was 16 to do the invoicing system for a hardware shop. So I'm now 43, so that gives you 27 years, 27 years, from 16, 27 years. And from the age of 10, so it's been 33 years I've been programming, right? So I think I've crossed my 10,000 hours several times. And one of the things you get good at, and actually being a tutor for me at university, tutoring other people, meant I saw hundreds of people's code and helped them debug thousands of programs. And debugging makes you a better programmer, right? Because you start to learn where to look, what might cause problems. And so when I look at a block of code, one of the things that I do is I go through and I kind of scan and think, okay, can I rank these lines of code in their likelihood of having a bug? Right? Just by seeing what kind of thing is being done in that line of code and how likely it is that that thing has been done wrong. Right? And so I don't just step through the entire program blindly looking for an error and kind of just systematically doing kind of breadth first search through the program. I try and do a best first search. I try and find an algorithm, a heuristic, that takes me to the bug quickly. Right? And that actually is one of the things that makes you a better programmer. Right? It's not your ability to type at the keyboard and get more lines of code into the file. Right? And in fact, that's why lines of code per day is a terrible metric as a quality measure for a programmer. Is not how many lines of code you add to the project, right? Because that's a really bad number. It's good lines. That's important. We'll also go through things in this course. I'm streaming this, so I'll be polite. But so we will refactor code. So we'll take bad code and we'll try and make it better. We'll also try and get rid of some of your bad habits that you might have fallen into, and we'll try and identify those by looking at your code, and hopefully I can show you some really bad habits that then you won't follow, by saying no, don't do this, it's really bad. We can also look at having side projects. If you guys want to do some functional programming or some logic programming, we can do some of that. And in the end, I want you to be able to feel that you are becoming more professional by the end of the course. Right? That you feel, yes, I can take on a task, I can write good quality code, I can be proud of the code that I write. Okay. Right, so we can have a break, seeing it's 3 o'clock. So we can have a break. We can come back now. I've got various things we can show you. I've got I can do a PowerPoint presentation of stuff if you like. I was thinking that it depends on where you want to start with the course, what you want us to be talking about. If you want to start talking about how to document your bachelor thesis so that you can start time logging, we can start talking about various, logging tools. I can show you Jira, and we can show you those sort of setups. Or when we can come back, we can talk about, any of these topics, and start going further on them. I thought I could introduce you to the programmer's oath, seeing that's what was going to be being taught. So if you have a look, I can bring up the programmer's oath and we can discuss that. Programmer's oath. So this is the ACM. The ACM is the Association of Computing Machines. So it's one of the big bodies. So this was a relatively recent, but he's going to have a webinar about this oath, right? So before we have the break, and what I want you to think about over the break is, do you agree with? So in order to defend and preserve the honor of the profession of computer programmers, are we an honorable discipline? I will not produce harmful code. The code that I produce will always be my best work. I will not knowingly allow code that is defective, either in behavior or structure, to accumulate. I will produce, with each release, a quick, sure, and repeatable proof that every element of the code works as it should. It's a hard one. I will make frequent small releases so that I do not impede the progress of others. As an ethical oath that you take. I will fearlessly and relentlessly improve my creations at every opportunity. I will never degrade them. Right? Now, Microsoft itself fails that one. Because what it does is it creates the professional version of Windows and then degrades it to create the home version. So it explicitly removes features, having implemented them, so that it can sell it at a cheaper rate than the full Pro version. Right? So it actively degrades its code. I will do all that I can to keep the productivity of myself and others as high as possible. I will do nothing that decreases that productivity. I will continue, so no introducing games a day before deadline. It's like, oh, there's this fun game you should play. Haha. No, that would be evil. I will continuously ensure that others can cover for me and that I can cover for them. Right? That's what Mariusz and I do. Right? That's one of the things we've tried to do, is we've tried to follow that one. Right? That if he's sick, I can do his stuff. If I'm sick, he can do my stuff. Right? That's as kind of a professional oath. I will produce estimates that are honest, both in magnitude and precision. I will not make promises without certainty. So if you say it will take me 3 days, you should. It'll take me somewhere between 1 day and 3 weeks. So try and be the levels of precision. And I will never stop learning and improving my craft. It's exactly what you basically had 9. Okay, so we'll have a 15-minute break. You can think about an oath of a programmer. Do you believe you need to take an oath? Okay, that break. See you back at 15:15. I will pause the stream and we'll come back afterwards.